April 28, 1941. Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, Virginia. Sparks shower from torches as crews lower the first steel plates into place. They are building CV-9 USS Essex, the seed of a ship type that will change the Pacific War. 872 feet of hull take shape on the blocks. Standard displacement, 27,100 tons. When fully loaded, 36,880 tons. A flight deck long enough to cycle 90 to 100 aircraft without pause. Nobody on that floor can see the future yet, but this single design will kick off the most aggressive carrier building sprint the world has ever seen. By 1941, American planners have learned a hard truth. Aircraft carriers aren't just part of a fleet. They are the fleet's decisive arm. Cut an enemy's air power at sea, and the rest of his ships are left naked. Across the ocean, the Imperial Japanese Navy has built its reputation on 6 first-line decks: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, the spearhead that struck Pearl Harbor and drove deep across the Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's doctrine puts naval aviation at the center of modern war. He's right about carriers deciding battles. He's wrong about who will own the decision. Essex runs her Shakedown in the Atlantic at 32.7 knots, Westinghouse-geared turbines churning out 150,000 shaft horsepower. Captain Donald Duncan surveys the chaos and order on the flight deck as an air group of 36 F6F Hellcats, 36 SB2C Helldivers, and 18 TBM Avengers cycle through drills. The class is designed for production as much as combat. Where the Japanese often tailor each carrier with unique traits, the U.S. standardizes repeatable sections, interchangeable parts, identical systems. It means speed. Speed not just through the water, but through the yards. The numbers prove it. Old habits across the Pacific require 4 to 5 years to finish a single carrier. Essex-class hulls average 20 months from keel to commissioning. That gap, along with training and logistics, will become the real weapon. On Shokaku, Captain Hiroshi Matsubara studies his logs. 9 war patrols behind him, 72 operational planes ready now. Steam turbines produce 160,000 shaft horsepower. A crew of 1,660 keeps the ship alive after near misses, torpedo scares, and long stretches of combat. He knows the weakness that keeps returning in every report. Japan cannot replace combat pilots or airframes at the rate the Americans can. New ships are planned, the Unryu class, simplified off Hiryu lines to shave months from the schedule, but too many will stall, and too few crews will be ready even if the hulls arrive. Back in the United States, the shipyard map fills in. Newport News is told to turn out 7 big decks. Bethlehem Steel's 4 River Yard takes 4 contracts to start. Philadelphia Navy Yard, Norfolk Navy Yard, New York. Navy Yard all join the push. Each yard specializes, but the plans stay consistent. Yorktown, CV-10, slides down the ways on December 21, 1942, 371 days after Pearl Harbor. Intrepid, CV-11, follows on April 26, 1943. Hornet, CV-12, on August 30, 1943. Franklin, CV-13, on October 14, 1943. The launches roll on like clockwork. On USS Bunker Hill, radarman First Class James Patterson stares at the SK scope. He pulls 4-hour watches, eyes adjusting to a dark room stitched by green traces. On a good day, his set can see out past 100 miles. The Japanese sets can't match that reach. At 14:35 on June 19, 1944, his screen blooms, multiple returns at 150 miles, bearing 260° relative. He punches the alarm, grabs the sound-powered phone, and speaks the words that turn every head in Combat Information Center. Large raid. Bearing 260. Range 150. Angels unknown. Closing. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa is out with everything the combined fleet can send for Operation Eigo, ordered by Admiral Soemu Toyota to do what Midway failed to do, spring a decisive trap. 9 carriers sail under Ozawa: Taiho, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Junyo, Hyo, Ryuho, Chaitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho. 440 carrier planes form Japan's last concentrated striking arm. Opposite them, Admiral Raymond Spruance with the Fifth Fleet. guiding the defense from USS Indianapolis. Enemy aircraft at 300 knots. Intercept time, 30 minutes. Combat air patrol. Hellcats are already up and now vector in on coordinates fed by radar. Air combat becomes math. Angles, knots, altitude. Ozawa's 9 decks can put 440 aircraft into the sky. Spruance's Task Force 58, spread across 15 carriers, 6 of them new Essexes, can flood the air with fighters and still keep torpedo and dive bombers ready. At 1500, the first major intercept hits. F6F Hellcats descend through the incoming Japanese formations like hawks at speed. 650 caliber guns, blistering rates of fire, armor, and self-sealing tanks built to take punishment. Once unmatched, A6M0s now find themselves outclimbed, outdived, and outgunned. Lieutenant Alexander Vratsiu shreds 6 planes in 8 minutes. The tactic is simple and merciless. Hold the high ground, slash through the formation, open up, extend away under speed, climb again, repeat. Many of the attackers have fewer than 100 flight hours. They run into Americans who have 500 to 1,000 hours and live inside a training and maintenance system that keeps them flying. A second wave arrives at 1530. 128 aircraft hit a sky already stacked with U.S. fighters and ships bristling with anti-aircraft guns. By nightfall, nearly 480 Japanese planes are wreckage or ocean foam. 346 of them carrier aircraft on June 19th alone. U.S. losses are 30 aircraft. The sheer imbalance earns a brutal nickname, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The math that made the day lopsided lives in classrooms and factories. Japan's path to a carrier-qualified pilot takes roughly 18 months even for barely acceptable proficiency. America turns out fully trained aviators in 6 months, and in volume, production outpaces Japanese totals 10-1. The next day, June 20th, Admiral Mark Mitcher says go for a far-range strike at the retreating fleet. 216 American planes launch late, pushing fuel to the edge. Hio goes down. Zuikaku and Chiyoda are hit. Another 65 enemy aircraft are destroyed. Then the fuel needles sag. Darkness is coming. The decision that becomes legend follows. Turn on the lights. Every ship in Task Force 58 becomes a lighthouse, risking submarines to save aviators. Some 80 planes are lost to fuel exhaustion. Most pilots are pulled from the sea. Japan loses 2 more carriers soon after, and the backbone of her trained naval flyers. The Philippine sea fight is more than a win. It's a verdict. The decisive battle dream, luring the U.S. close to home waters for annihilation, is dead. American industry has already decided the outcome. By July 1944, 14 Essex-class carriers are operating in the Pacific: Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Franklin, Ticonderoga, Randolph, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Hancock, Bennington, Boxer, and Bonhomme Richard. Air groups of roughly 90 to 100 aircraft each, sometimes more by 1945 with added night fighters, give the fleet over 1,400 frontline aircraft, plus trained replacements waiting. Since Pearl Harbor, Japan has finished only 1 true new fleet carrier, Taiho, commissioned March 7, 1944. She lasts 3 months before USS Albacore sends her under. Shinano, converted from a Yamato-class battleship, commissions November 19, 1944, then goes down 10 days later, on November 29th, to 4 torpedoes from USS Archer Fish. She remains the largest ship ever sunk by a submarine. Meanwhile, the United States is completing 1 Essex every 2 months. Japanese yards need 4 years to produce 1. By October 1944, Leyte Gulf, the ending is baked in. 17 American carriers pound away on October 24th alone. Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, including Yamato and Musashi, finds out what concentrated air power does to battle ships. Musashi takes 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs before rolling over, a demonstration of what an Essex air group can concentrate. North of there, Admiral Ozawa's Decoy, Northern Force, Zuikaku, Zuiho, Chiyoda, Chiyoda, can scrape together only 116 aircraft, and many of those are flown by trainees with fewer than 50 hours. U.S. carriers launch 527 sorties on October 25th and erase all 4 carriers. Zuikaku, last survivor of the Pearl Harbor raiders, sinks with most of her men. By then, Admiral William Halsey's Third Fleet counts 17 fast carriers, the core Essexes surrounded by light decks. Task Force 38 can keep airplanes launching every 90 minutes for days. Japan's naval aviation is collapsing into one-way kamikaze attacks. March 19, 1945. USS Franklin is struck by 2 armor-piercing bombs. Fires race through the hangar. Detonations cascade. Casualties are horrific. 724 killed, 265 wounded. The worst losses any U.S. carrier survives. And yet she does survive, steams for the United States under her own power, and could have returned to war if needed. Where Midway's Akagi, Keiga, Soryu, and Hiryu were undone by catastrophic internal fires, Essex-class ships keep fighting. Design and training make the difference. American damage control is religion. Japanese doctrine spent its soul on attack power and left too little for survival. Commander John Thatch, famous for the Thatch Weave, puts it plainly. Every Essex multiplies combat power through bigger air groups, smarter radar, stronger anti-air suites, and ship systems that tolerate hits others cannot. And the ledger doesn't lie. The U.S. Navy orders 32 Essexes, 26 laid down, 24 commissioned. Japan, across 2 decades, puts fewer than a dozen true fleet carriers into service. Hosho, Akagi, Kaga, Ryujo, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Taiho, and the incomplete Unryu line. In 1943 alone, America finishes more carriers than Japan managed in 20 years. Look back at the yards. Newport News completes 7 Essexes: Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Franklin, Ticonderoga, Randolph, each in under 20 months from keel to commissioning. 3 carriers at once in the sheds through 1943 and 1944, thousands of women adding their labor to the arc of steel. Bethlehem's Fore River completes 6, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Hancock, Shangri-La, Lake Champlain, with a learning curve that tightens schedules. Lake Champlain sets a record, 14 months from keel to commission. Philadelphia pushes modular construction, prefabricate whole sections while the keel goes down. Antietam and Boxer leave the yard in 15 and 16 months. Techniques born for Essexes will ripple through shipbuilding long after the peace. Individual ships build legends. Lexington, the Blue Ghost. Because Tokyo Rose keeps reporting her sunk, fights from Tarawa to Japan, knocks down more than 300 aircraft, and shrugs off multiple kamikaze hits. USS Enterprise, Yorktown-class but integrated into the same doctrine, operates seamlessly with Essex groups. Cross-decking aircraft and pilots become standard, a flexibility Japan's one-off designs cannot match. Japan scrambles for answers. Shinano's conversion tries to salvage the massive Yamato-class hull into air power. She lasts 10 days. The Unryu program aims at simplified mass production, but cancellations and shortages pile up. Crews don't materialize. Even the few completed ships sail without full air groups. Meanwhile, by January 1945, Task Force 58 roams Japanese home waters with impunity. Mitcher can throw 1,000 planes at Tokyo. Japan has no carriers left at sea and fewer than 100 carrier-qualified pilots. The human cost ledger is merciless. In the Philippine sea fight, U.S. losses are 123 aircraft and 109 dead. The exchange destroys nearly 600 Japanese planes, 2 fleet carriers, a light carrier, and 2 oilers, and takes almost 3,000 trained Japanese sailors and aviators off the board. Each Essex needs about 3,000 crew. U.S. training pipelines are graduating roughly 5,000 carrier-qualified personnel monthly by this stage. Japan's training apparatus is sputtering by late 1944. Technology widens the gap. SK and SK-2 radar aboard U.S. carriers reach out beyond 150 miles for fighter direction. IFF, identification. Friend or foe saves lives when hundreds of aircraft crowd the plot. Japanese ships rely on observers and short-range sets under 50 miles. Essex flight decks run like factories, launch an 80-plane strike in under 45 minutes, recover with LSO paddles, and improved arresting gear turn around and do it again. Japanese decks take nearly 2 hours for equivalent cycles and rack up higher accident rates. Inside each Essex sits a Combat Information Center, CIC, that remakes naval warfare, real-time tracking of airborne and surface contacts, radio touch with every aircraft, coordination across multiple task groups. Japan leans on voice tubes and manual boards. Even how ships breathe fuel matters. U.S. aviation fuel systems are sealed and purged with CO2. Tanks sit inside voids and compartments designed to prevent vapor explosions. Taiho shows the other path. One torpedo hit. Fuel vapor explosions do the rest. Kamikazes begin in October 1944, the last card. They're brave and desperate, and often thwarted. Intrepid absorbs 5 kamikaze hits and returns. Ticonderoga takes 2, loses 144 men, and stays in action. Essex herself is struck on November 25, 1944. 15 men die, but the structure holds. The expectation that one hit equals a dead carrier keeps failing. May 11, 1945. Bunker Hill takes 2 kamikazes in 30 seconds. Fires rip bow to stern. 389 men die. Any Japanese carrier would be finished. Bunker Hill points east and sails to Bremerton for repairs. Survival isn't an accident. It's planning and practice. By March 1945, Bonhomme Richard joins as the 14th Essex to see combat. Counting light and escort carriers, American decks in the Pacific number over 100. Japan has no carriers at sea and under 5,000 aircraft of all types across the home islands. Admiral Chester Nimitz sends his assessment to Admiral Ernest King. The Essex program has given the U.S. not just ships, but a complete system. Air power, radar, training, logistics, doctrine, which Japan cannot parallel. Momentum never stops. Shangri-La commissions September 15, 1944. Lake Champlain arrives June 3, 1945. Tarawa joins December 8, 1945. Even with victory in sight, the line keeps moving because planners are already thinking about the world after 1945. From the Central Pacific raids in Tarawa and the Gilberts onward, Essex has become the backbone of every major amphibious operation through Okinawa. During the Marianas Campaign, 15 carriers generate 450 fighter sweeps, 220 bombing strikes, and round-the-clock CAP-E for 19 straight days. Availability stays above 80% despite losses and maintenance churn. Land-based Japanese aviation ceases to exist as a deciding factor. In October 1944 in the Philippines, 4 task groups with 17 fast carriers launch over 400 sorties on October 24th alone at Leyte Gulf. Musashi's end is the proof of concentrated naval air power in the modern age. Meanwhile, Commander David McCampbell, Princeton-educated, obsessed with tactics and logistics, flies with Air Group 15 off Essex. On June 19, 1944, he bags 5 dive bombers in a morning that makes him an ace in a day. That afternoon, he knocks down 2 more Zeros over Guam. On October 24, 1944, he does what no other American airman will, becomes an ace in a day twice, shooting down 9 planes on one mission. AG-15, the fabled 15, will tally 315 airborne kills, 348 on the ground, and sink 296,500 tons of shipping, a battleship, 3 carriers, 9 cruisers, and 19 destroyers in 6 months of hard fighting. Training tells its own story. An Essex Air Group needs roughly 350 pilots and aircrew. U.S. programs are producing around 2,000 naval aviators every month by 1944. Japan produces fewer than 100 partially trained flyers monthly by late 1944. Operational losses from accidents hit about 2% per month for U.S. groups. Inexperienced Japanese units suffer around 10% monthly even before facing U.S. fighters. By 1945, combat loss ratios are worse than 10.1 against Japan. The Turkey Shoot isn't an outlier, it's the pattern. Industry fills the magazines. Grumman builds 12,275 Hellcats between 1943 and 1945. Curtiss Wright turns out 7,140 Helldivers. General Motors Eastern Aircraft Division manufactures 9,139 TBM Avengers. One country's monthly output exceeds the other's annual totals by 1944. and the hidden strength, replenishment at sea, keeps the punch airborne. Oilers, ammo ships, supply vessels slide alongside in rolling swells to top off and reload. Underway replenishment, perfected in the war, lets carriers linger for months. Japanese carriers need to duck into port, time their enemies use to move and strike. Iwo Jima in February 1945 shows endurance. Carriers pound targets for 72 hours before Marines land, then provide close air support for 36 days straight. Essex alone flies 1,018 combat sorties, drops 156 tons of bombs, and fires 141 rockets. No Japanese carrier force can sustain that tempo in 1945. Then comes Okinawa. Task Force 58 fields 18 fast carriers, 14 Essexes plus light decks, over 1,400 aircraft ready, with spare planes and pilots staged. Japan scrapes together about 1,600 aircraft of all types for kamikaze strikes, many flown by students with fewer than 30 hours. 82 days of assault follow. Essexes stay on station, despite nearly 2,000 kamikaze sorties. Bunker Hill, Enterprise, Randolph. All hit, all endure, all return. By July and August 1945, the raids on the home islands are one-sided. On July 10th, Task Force 38 launches 1,022 sorties against Tokyo, more planes than Japan has across the home islands. Anti-aircraft guns bark in reply. They rarely change the map. The atomic bombs end the war before Operation Olympic, the planned invasion, can gather an even bigger storm of decks. Britain's carriers join late in the Pacific and fight hard, bringing armored flight decks of their own but smaller air groups. HMS Formidable carries 36 aircraft to an Essex's 100. Even allies note the American tempo, adopt U.S. damage control practices, and study the logistics web that keeps U.S. groups punching. After the surrender, the scoreboard is clear. Not one Essex-class carrier is lost to enemy action, though many take heavy damage. Japanese carriers, nearly all of them, are gone. That's not luck. That's design, training, and an industrial base feeding them both. Admiral Raymond Spruance captures the center line. The Essex program didn't merely outclass enemy ships. It built a system that stacked advantage everywhere. More planes, better radar, stronger AA, tighter CICs, faster turnarounds, tougher fuel systems, deeper training, longer reach. America produces more fleet carriers in 1943 than Japan does in 2 decades. That reality seals the Pacific. The legacy runs far beyond VJ Day. Essex-class decks go to Korea, to Vietnam, and serve as training ships into the 1990s. USS Lexington doesn't decommission until 1991, 48 years of service. Every carrier that follows carries Essex DNA in its steel and doctrine. The construction methods, welding over riveting for 30% faster build times, modular blocks swung into place by giant cranes, improved ventilation to kill fuel vapor hazards, armored flight decks, deck edge elevators, become standard practice. Radar-directed fighter control, perfected by fighter directors in the CIC talking pilots onto intercepts, becomes the normal way to protect fleets. One Essex CIC can coordinate a task group's entire air defense. Japan never builds the equivalent during the war. People carry the system. Every sailor learns damage control. Every carrier builds fire teams that move like muscle memory in smoke and heat. Surgery is available on board. 60 beds stand ready for the wounded. Japanese carriers, by comparison, carry minimal medical facilities and light damage control doctrine. The difference is measured in ships saved. At home, the economy shifts to meet the demand. Newport News expands from 11,000 to 31,000 workers between 1941 and 1943. 3 shifts keep the lights hot around the clock. By 1944, women make up about 20% of the workforce. Each Essex takes around 55,000 tons of steel, roughly 1,000 miles of electrical cable, and 250,000 man-hours. Japan's Diet passed 4 bills between 1932 and 1941 to subsidize commercial shipbuilding with military features. Conversions can't keep pace with purpose-built carriers, not when the other side is building specialized warships on assembly line principles. By August 1945, the Essex-class has done something unique in naval history, A single class becomes the backbone of a war's outcome, not by ace pilots alone, or clever tactics alone, or radar alone, by system, by building more, training more, connecting more, and surviving more than the other side could imagine. Vice Admiral John McCain, Task Force 38 at war's end, summarizes it bluntly. An Essex isn't just steel, it's the ship, the air group, the fuel ships, the spare parts, the training pipelines, the factories, the whole machine. That's not fighting fair, that's fighting to win. From April 1941, when Essex is laid down, to August 1945, when Japan surrenders, American shipyards deliver 24 Essex-class carriers to the fleet. 14 of them see combat before the shooting stops. Their air groups knock down over 5,000 Japanese aircraft and send roughly 200,000 tons of warships under. Japanese naval aviation, which opened the war with terrifying success at Pearl Harbor, is erased by industrial power bent to a purpose. Future Chief of Naval Operations Arleigh Burke watches the Essexes at work with Task Force 58 and says, in his no-nonsense way, Japan started with the world's best carrier pilots. America ended with the only carrier pilots. Essex made that inevitable through numbers and design, through training and repair, through radar plots and deck crews who never flinched. It wasn't a fair fight by 1945. It was a landslide built in steel. In the deep Pacific, the wrecks mark the turning. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu at Midway. Shoho in the Coral Sea. Shokaku and Taiho in the Philippine Sea. Zuikaku, Chitose, Chiyoda, Zuiho off Leyte. Crews on both sides fought with courage the ocean still remembers. But bravery cannot outrun empty factories. The Essex program proves something brutal and simple. In modern war at sea, quantity married to quality wins. The carrier replaces the battleship as the capital ship, not because it is glamorous, but because it projects power farther, faster, and longer than anything afloat, and because a nation committed to building them faster than they can be sunk bends outcomes. Admiral Chester Nimitz's final word to the Secretary of the Navy lands like a stamp. The Essex-class is the greatest concentration of naval air power ever achieved. Not one ship alone, but the whole living system around it made victory certain. Battleships drift into roles as escorts and bombardment platforms. Carriers take the crown. The arithmetic behind it becomes doctrine for every navy that matters. By war's end, the equation reads like a headline. 24 ships of one design. Over 2,000 operational aircraft at any one time. About 30,000 trained carrier personnel in the pipeline. Industrial mobilization that outstrips any command economy. And a fleet that could launch, recover, rearm, repair, and do it again every 90 minutes for as long as it took. That is the story the Pacific writes in contrails and wake lines. Essex isn't just a ship. It's the moment the United States decides to fight with factories and schools and procedures as fiercely as with guns. And once that decision sets, the ending is foregone. Quantity, with quality, becomes absolute victory.